Okay, Tim Coopers is asking, maybe it's different with cloud database versus on-prem, but why wouldn't you just overwrite the test DB with raw data? If you're looking to keep a copy of your test DB, I would generally recommend people make a backup of test. If you're doing development work and haven't gotten everything tested and verified, make a copy before you blow it away. But yeah, I would just turn around and overwrite test with an updated version of prod so that I'm periodically refreshing it. But if you're in the middle of testing customizations or testing, hey, if we change our data this way, how does it interact with this? Not all the testing is done by all of the business units at the time you're trying to change the database.
But like Mark had said too, where he's seen somebody taking a prod, put it on a test, and then the test somehow gets leaked out and exposes some of your company information. So for just development, you might be better off doing a demo instance and then put in the data that you actually need to test with so that you're not exposing that information to a third party. So it depends on why you're asking the question there, Tim, but both of those are reasons why you might want to do that.
Yeah, actually, the most recent example was Fox News. They had had a data breach in April of a lot of stuff because it was one of their databases were left open on a AWS instance, and released a lot of employee data and some salary data and some other things. So yeah, it's something you got to be careful about these days, because any probably worse than ransomware is data exfiltration. So something you want to think about.
Also, if you're in the cloud, the company that you're hosting with, you want to make sure their security is really good and up to date, because when someone hacks a cloud, you get everyone in the cloud, not just the person that's hosting the cloud. So going with a firm that you know has good shields and is constantly maintaining their security is something you definitely want to consider when you go into the cloud. Even just choosing like a MSP or a managed IT house, you want to make sure, because they move up the target closer to the center of the bullseye for hackers out there, because you're no longer hacking one, you're hacking, oh, they have 100 customers, we're going after all their customers. So you definitely want to make sure who you're selecting for your cloud is maintaining security. They're up to date on everything, not just saying it, but actually doing it. And with that, we are at the 1:30. Any other questions? Well, thanks, guys. That was very helpful. It's always fun to have multiple databases. So with that one, who do we have on the Stump the Chump panel today? I see Caleb is still out there, Beth is out there, myself, Fred, Hasso, and Jose. Christine, you're still out there, and I see Mark. Anybody else joining in on this one, Fred? They might have emailed you.
Nope, this is everybody.
Yeah, I may have to jump off because we launched 365 mail today. So if somebody comes in, I might have to jump out.
Awesome. Never a dull moment.
Epicore's not sending emails at the moment, so that's what I'm working on now.
Oh, that sounds like fun, Mark. I'm glad I'm not there.
Jose, is that a Stump the Chump question?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's
actually, it's just a statement at this point. The Chump has been stumped, yes.
Okay.
I think it was a call out for my help, Hasso, but I'm not responding.
Awesome. So our first Stump the Chump question, and I apologize, no, I didn't get to look this one over yet. And I'm trying to see here. Overseas inventory in transit. So you have products sitting on a boat, on the slow boat, coming back from EU or from China. You own the inventory because you paid for it when it left their dock. Travels overseas for 30, recently 90 days, and then where do these items sit? Because they haven't been received yet. They're not physically in your warehouse, but they're kind of in your warehouse, just in transit to get to it. But if there's a loss or a damage or the ship goes down, we're going to have an inventory claim to get that repaired. So the question was, how do people handle inventory that's in transit? Suggestions: maintaining a separate warehouse using non-nettable bins. That would be a method of doing it. The container module. Then I can show what boat it's on, when it left the dock, when it's due to arrive. I can track any duties, tariffs, or costs and associate that over the container.
If it's all in the same company, you could have them as different sites, and then you use the transfer order functionality, and then you can have different general ledger accounts for that to get a better reporting out of how much dollars is in transit.
Yeah, I suppose you could have a transit bin in your warehouse, but
I can tell you, at least in 10.2.500, Epicor, the money just disappears in Epicor on a in transit intercompany order. Once it's shipped, it goes into nowhere. It's not hitting an intercompany account, which I think it should, and there's an Epicor idea for it. It just disappeared. So the only way we got around it is on the day we shipped it, in the intercompany, we immediately received it to another warehouse and kept it not non-nettable because we wanted MRP to know it was coming. But that was the only way we could get the accounting to work, because then the liability showed up in the books. In our case, it was the person, as soon as they left the dock, the ownership transferred. But that was the only way to get the accounting to work and not have to do it manually outside of Epicor, unless that's changed.
And then attach the late cost to AP invoice for tariffs and duties. It's
intercompany, so we weren't going to do, in our case. If it's with a customer, that's a different story. But in our case, it was intercompany, so there's, the tariffs and duties were all internal.
Yeah, it looks like they're going from a supplier to them.
I was just reading again.
yeah, supplier.
I see that.
So
That is. Okay.
I would recommend, setting up a bin called Transit within your warehouse, and make it a nettable bin. So don't make it a non-nettable bin. And I would then receive the items to that bin. But I would also do a BPM on there that says that no one can issue material from that bin to a job. So you stop people from trying to receipt it to a job or whatever you need to do.
Yeah, but
so there's some things you can do that around that.
Only thing you want to be careful with is if you do it as a nettable bin versus non-nettable in the MRP sense. Because if you run MRP tightly, 90 days sitting in there can skew you up.
It thinks it's available, and it's not.
It's available.
Then you should definitely make it a non-nettable bin to keep it away from MRP until it is received into an actual inventory bin.
Yeah, you could do that.
Did somebody mention already container landed cost entry? Because I think that'll do most of what you need. You can track ship dates and ship quantities and what has arrived, what hasn't. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that we use that quite heavily for our international shipments. So as soon as it gets on the boat, we enter the information in the container landed cost entry, select the carrier, the boat, the ship quantity, the ship date, and the transit time and all that stuff, and then we just basically track it through.
The port that is coming from, the arrival date.
Yep, and basically use that for any reporting needs. And then once it arrives, we just do container receipt, and then it actually shows up in our inventory. But in the meantime, while it's in transit, we track it via container landed cost entry, because that tracks it down to the line level part quantity and all that stuff. And it ties it back to the PO.
That's why I think that would be that's why I led off with that first one. I'm like, I would think that landed cost container tracking would handle this out of the box for you, but it is an add-on module.
Yeah, so if you don't have it, that's a different story.
Also, the items show that they're in transit, but they're not usable.
Correct. Which I think is what they want, maybe.
Okay, well, I appreciate all the suggestions. You know, I think the container module was one thing. We thought it might have been overkill, but sounds like it handles it pretty well. Maybe it's just setting up that non-net or nettable bin and not allowing people to issue out of there. That's also another good solution. So I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Yep. The only caveat I would say with the container is figuring out how to amortize the cost. Is it by volume, size of part, weight of the part, total value of the shipment, so that when you go to amortize, because it will turn around and amortize the cost for the entire container over the components that are in the container, but you just want to make sure how you're divvying that up, because I know you guys, some are made of metal, some are made of, hey, this is the belts that go around the motor.
Yeah,
those aren't as heavy as the motor. Awesome. Next one, Lisa McCarthy from Modern Welding Company. Fred, do you want to answer this one? Or do you want to read about the question from Lisa? I'll go ahead and unmute her because you put an entire slide page in here for Lisa on how to handle this issue.
Sure. There's the next slide, which has the answer. Lisa sent this to me, and it's something I've run into several times where Epicor is storing things as either carriage return line feeds at the end of lines, or sometimes just carriage return, sometimes both. It's hard to tell what you're going to end up with. And so Lisa correctly was trying to figure out how do I accommodate that inside the SSRS form so that it's always consistent. She was also wanting to get rid of duplicates. So if a person had hit enter 4 times, she didn't want 4 spaces. She wanted things to kind of condense in there. So if you go to the next slide, Calvin, I put together what you do is you actually create a custom function inside of SSRS. And I gave her the steps here. When you're on the report, you'll click outside of that report body area, right click like you were going to do properties and change the margins. On that dialog that pops up on the left, there's also a code module. So you click on that code, and then you can write Visual Basic script for code. And gave her this simple function that will translate multiple carriage returns, multiple line feeds into single carriage return, single line feeds. And then you, in your SSRS report on the field, instead of just saying that I'm reporting on fields x part num dot value, you'd actually say equals code dot your function, which in this case is strip returns, and then pass in the value that you're looking to do. And since our function returns a string, it just outputs that string into the field. So this was a quick, down and dirty, easy way to get those out of there.
Awesome. Thanks, Fred. I saw that this one was a little abnormal because you had the answer also in here on different slides. So
yeah, I looked it up for Lisa and sent her the answer, but I wanted to keep it in Stump the Chump because several people run into this. So it's a handy thing to have.
And I do appreciate it too, because it's the first time that I've ever used a function. So it really did help me. So I appreciate it.
You betcha. And you can use functions as well if you've got a report where you need to do complex math on different fields. Usually you'd want to do the math inside of a calculated field, but perhaps that doesn't work and you need it in the report itself. You can also use something like this to do that as well. I've also seen people who have tried to put barcode graphic calculations inside of a function. There's other things that are better suited for that, but that's what the functions are there for. And the custom code is so that you can do things that might be more extensive than what you can do with native SSRS.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. And our next Stump the Chump is from Shahan Khan up at Federal Foam, trying to implement ROHS. Why would you do that? Sorry, just kidding. Let me go ahead and finish replying here. Okay. So you're trying to implement the ROH model. You got all of your restrictions and substance info set on your parts and your component parts. And it all went in there, but it didn't update any of your methods because those were already built. The ECOs were already in the system. The ROHS is still sitting over on the part records. That ROHS info moves over to the ECO when you build the BOM, not when you update the part record. So you're asking, do you need to revise all the existing methods to pull the ROHS from the component parts? Yes, you do need to do that to get it to pull back in and update. We can go into the engineer workbench for every part one by one, delete the part, re-add the part. That'll pull in all the ROHS info. That would be an awesome way to do this. It's going to be really time taking. Or just go ahead and run a DMT, and there are a couple ways to do that. You can DMT deleting all the parts off the BOMs, and then run an add DMT to put them all right back on with their original data, and that'll pull in the additional ROHS info over. Another way would be to just run a DMT of the ROHS part data into the ECO for each material for the fields that got updated. Anybody else have ideas on how to do this?
Is there not a data fix for this? Or is this just...
Not that I know of.
Me either. I was going to check.
Shahan, I've also unmuted you if you need to ask further.
No, thank you for showing this question. I was just trying to get more information, like if what are the other people are doing? Are they using this module, or this is only way for using this module or not? So. Because it seems like pretty much huge work every time when you change any part details or part information from substance. We have to maintain, like recreate all the methods. So it doesn't look like an easy way.
Monty Wilson is suggesting you could use a method directive or a data directive so that when you update the ROHS, it goes out and updates all the approved BOMs that contain that item.
Can you repeat this, please?
Monty was saying using a method directive or a data directive. That when you update the part record with all of its ROHS restrictions and hazardous substance info, then have the method directive go find all ECOs for that ECO material where that part number was referenced and update those fields accordingly there too.
Okay. So it's kind of a BPM you have to create, or?
Correct, a BPM or even a data directive when you're updating your ROHS, but you'd have to monitor all the fields on the ROHS tabs. Matt, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Matthew Heck, are you guys using that over there at Latitude?
No, we have thought about getting this module, but you're still talking about the ROHS module here?
Yep.
Yeah, no, we've thought about it, but we have yet to pull the trigger on purchasing it because we weren't sure on the value add for the cost.
Got it. I knew it was in your plan somewhere in the past. I remember you guys talking about, but didn't know if you guys went into it.
I believe
the other, just using the DMT to load the info.
So thank you for sharing this question and the answer. That will be helpful.
Awesome. Great. The next one we have here is from Pierre. Jose, how'd that go? How
I
to
have that
create an
here.
updatable external BAQ, and then the update
Right.
process is not clear.
Okay, give me presenter. I'll walk through it real quick.
Which one are you? There are two of you.
There should be.
I'm going to say the green speaking one.
The green speaking guy. There you go. That'll help. There, that worked. Okay. So I did a little bit of playing this afternoon after earlier. So I just made a simple BAQ, external BAQ here, connected to my external data source. And all this is just an order head. We happen to have an external data source that is a replicated database for Epicor. But if for some reason we wanted to update that, not recommended generally, but if we wanted to update that, you can definitely do that via the standard update process. So again, you mark your fields as updatable, just like normal, and you set your update processing here to be BPM advanced only. There's a couple of caveats to this. And so originally when the question was asked, I thought it was, oh, I want to update some Epicor data via the business objects, which is pretty easy. This one is they want to update the external database directly. And so that requires a couple of things. Number one, you need to connect to that database. And number two, you need to run the straight SQL command on there for that. So if you go to the update processing base code here, and I will export this BAQ and make it available, or at least a code for it. There's a couple of things you need to do. The first thing that you need to figure out is that the connection string to your external database is encrypted at rest within Epicor. That is that when you create an external data source in Epicor, Epicor keeps that connection string in the database, but it keeps it encrypted. That way, if somebody comes and steals your database, or like Mark said earlier, you get exfiltrated data, they won't also get access to yet another data source. So Epicor is nice like that, keeps it encrypted at rest. But that means that it's also encrypted from you. You don't have access to that connection string. So the first thing you gotta do is you gotta pull that connection string out of the system and then decrypt it. Now, Epicor does provide the libraries to do this built into the framework. So all you have to do is basically do a query on your database using LINQ to find that connection string from the external data sources. And then you run it through the decryption library. And that's gonna give you back an unencrypted plain text connection string to that external data source. At that point, you just use standard SQL to make those updates. So you make a connection with your new connection string, you open that connection, you make a SQL command, and then you loop through your result set in your query. In this case, I'm looping through everything that has updated, and then you execute a SQL statement. So update set equals to where I like to use Cicero ID because that guarantees you're going to hit the right record every single time. And then you hit execute non-query. And then when you're all said and done, you close your connection. So as a demonstration of that, if I go here to my BAQ and I double click on this, make a change to the PO and click update, you're gonna see what happens. So in this case, it says the update permissions was denied on object order head, which means it worked. But it complained about updating because we purposely have that data source set as read only. So that's the one caveat is that if your data source or the account that you're using for your connection is set as read only, even if you do connect, you won't be able to update that. So the alternative to that is you can either set up a secondary data set with a non-read-only password, or you can just hard code your connection string in the code. But I am really big proponent of not hard coding connection strings or usernames or passwords or anything like that in your system. That's why I made a point of going to the original external data set, pulling that in, decrypting it, and using what the system has built in. If you hard code that username and password in your BPM, that means that you're storing a username and password in plain text in your database, which means that when your data gets exfiltrated, and I said when, not if, they're going to get that username and password, and that's probably going to be a system administrator level password that's going to cost you lots of money. So do not hard code in your code usernames and passwords or connection strings. Use the facilities built into Epicor, like the external data source, to do that. but this is how you would do an update to an external data table. And I will take the code snapshot here and I will post it on every user's tool along with the rest of the presentation this morning.
Yahoo! See, never a dull moment.
All right.
Yeah, let's see if I can get the screen back going here. And are we back to the Stump the Chump screen?
Yep, John Myers.
Awesome. And John Myers over at Kennel is asking how to set the archive period for material tags to at least 1 day. Needs to examine data in the material tag data table and wants to set the archive period so that lovely GUID table doesn't get thrown away so quickly. So, inside Kinetic or in Classic, depends on where you're doing this, John. 2 different ways to go about doing this. Putting your customization on the Classic so that when the reports fail or when this form loads, you can set the default value for the archive period. Using a row rule to set the default value for the archive period is another way to do that. And then also in Kinetic, actually there's a video sample up on Epicor of how to set Epicor report field default values so that when the form loads, these are the values that are on the Kinetic form. That video is available on the ERP videos collection under App Studio. So there were a handful of different ways. I just wasn't sure which way you were doing it in Classic or Kinetic. So I kind of put the answer out there for both. And I'm going to try and find you, John, make sure that that answered your question and that you understand which way to go. You're unmuted there, John.
Yeah, pardon me. The form that we're working with is an SSRS form in Classic.
Okay, so just setting that when the form pops up, going into either customization or even, I think in personalization, you can also set default values. Am I correct in Classic? Anybody know that offhand? I'm pretty sure you can set default property values.
Okay. Okay, where exactly are we talking about? In the SSRS form or in the report style?
In the actual, when the screen loads for the material tag, I would turn around and put it on that screen itself. I don't think that's available from the menu.
Yeah, I think you'd have, if you were going to do it with a personalization, it'd have to be on the, when you go to run the report, before you click the print preview, there's the archive dropdown.
I don't think I've ever seen that in when I'm talking about when we do end activity. There's a print tags button. At that point, I've never seen a drop.
Yeah, that one doesn't do a preview. Yeah, it just prints the tags, doesn't it?
Right.
Yep. So that. I have a solution. It's not pretty. It's actually really ugly. Let's disregard that solution.
First off, what version are you looking at, John? 10.1, 10.2, 11, 12?
Right now, this would be 10 to 700.21.
Didn't you just hard code the parameter directly in the SSRS report itself instead of having whatever it's currently set to read from the system? Just if that's not available, info in the menu.
But it's not the SSRS that does the archiving, it's Epicor. So what you have to go in and you set the archive period. I think it's days to expire or expires on, but you'd have to do that in every table that gets created. And the ugly thought that I had was, well, you could write a trigger that when a material tag table is created, then you could duplicate it to another database and then you'd have the data. But like I said, that's really ugly. And you'd have to maintain that other database and clean the data out after so long, or write a process that kills off those tables eventually. So I don't like that solution, although it could work.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so what exactly are we talking about? Using a trigger to write to another table, or are we talking about how would we go about setting an archive period?
So are you saying that the print tags in NLabor doesn't have the archive period?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't show the dialogue.
I'm looking at it now. It does.
That's what I was pulling up on my screen here just right now.
If you want me to share again, I can. But yeah, if you go to end activity and click print tags, at least in this version,
Jose, that's I was just pulling up 10.2. Yeah. Let me go ahead and move you back over to presenter, Jose.
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, because when I did it, it definitely did.
Okay.
Do that. So here's the archive period.
Okay.
Wait a minute. This is in Kinetic, isn't it?
I mean,
it's not Kinetic. This is classic.
This is the classic. It's just orange because reasons. But yeah, when I went to end activity and I click print tag, this screen came up, and I have the option to set an archive period.
And here you would just put a customization on this to
set
the archive to a week.
Okay, I've never seen this form at all, ever. If you hide this for a second and go to print tags.
That's literally what I clicked. That's what came up.
Our form is customized. And
so it might be hiding.
Yeah, it may very well be that the
or we need to look at the print tags button if that's a customization on your end activity, because we do have that for some customers where we have built where the dialog doesn't pop up. We just print the tags and auto spit them out the printer for them, but we pass all the parameters programmatically.
Right.
The launch form, we're actually calling the launch form and the print function. It's just doing it all in back for the user. I don't believe we built that for you guys, but hey. Yeah. Otherwise, once you show this form, that's what I was saying, is you would just customize it. So when this form comes up, if it is a print tag that's loading, then change the archive period, because it is a generic print tag here as well as print tags from receipt entry. So purchase receiving uses the same form as MES receiving.
Okay.
You might be able to save defaults too.
Yeah, you can save defaults up here. Where is it?
Yeah,
you can personalize.
Save default. So if you set that to say a week and then go to action, save default, and the next time it'll come up with that defaulted in there.
Right. Okay.
Actually, John, try doing a print tag from time and expense entry, because the button should be available on that form as well.
Okay.
And that may not be running the customization you deployed through MES.
Okay. I'll try both of those and see what I can come up with. Because the thing is, I need to change something on the SSRS form, but apparently the form that's being used right now doesn't have what I'm expecting. The customized form we use is actually what we call a move ticket, and the form is checking off operations in a new section, or excuse me, actually in the sub report. And I don't have any way currently of saving the material tag information so I can see how it's actually doing that. So, okay, I will try that from.
If you have developer privileges, you can just run MES in developer mode and then run the base form, and then you won't get that customization while you're testing.
Right. Yeah, I can certainly do that. Okay, I will try one of those or all of them and see what I can find out. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, John. And after John's question, we had updating external BAQs. Pierre again. So I think we already got that one.
Yeah, I must have duplicated. I'm sorry.
Not a worry. Then we have Dan Tillery over at Youngberg. Is there a best practice for switching from average costing to FIFO?
Yeah,
Anybody?
don't.
All I would think of as FIFO layers need to be set for before you do the switch so that you can put the inventory cost back in, because the FIFO layers base the count of what's in there. That's not an easy thing to turn around and switch over to. Because I think to do that, you would have to back the inventory out and then mass load the inventory back in with its receipt date or FIFO date. Anyone know if there's a conversion program that would fix that?
I don't know of any conversion program, but I was going to say, Calvin, that's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, you'd have to back out all your inventory, and then you'd have to put it in FIFO layers. And then you have to be very disciplined to make sure everything's done. It's not an easy task.
The system's going to force it, because once you put that layer in there, it's going to create the record and track that layer in quantity for that FIFO cost.
Yeah.
But you have to have all that information to load back in, especially if you have inventory right now on the shelf that may have come from more than one FIFO layer.
Exactly. So yes, you'd have to do that. And if you're looking, and this is for purchase parts, or are you looking at doing it for all of your inventory?
I guess you could do that if you just turn around and took the average cost that's on file and set that as the FIFO for the layer that's there, and just defaulted them all to the same, because then your inventory asset value is going to tie back.
Yeah, whatever. You could make it one layer, and this is the starting layer. Yeah, and whatever the cost was as far as the average cost. But you'll want to make sure, yeah.
And then have an inventory adjustment reason for cost change, so that you know why everything went to zero and why it all returned right back in after the conversion.
Yeah.
But I would use the DMT for doing that, because otherwise it's just too long for someone to do that, or you run the risk of errors.
Right.
I have a better solution. Stay on average and enjoy all the free time you'll get back.
Exactly.
ROI right there. There's your ROI. All the time you're going to save dealing with crazy costs.
And then Dan had a second question to this. I went ahead and unmuted you, Dan, if you want to unmute yourself. The cost roll-up, how often do you run this? Can you run it on specific parts, or is it all by average, standard, et cetera? And the best place to run it, I would say, is definitely the cost workbench, because that will turn around and pull in all of the purchase parts. It'll pull in all of your labor and your burden and your rates, pull in all your purchase parts, and then let the roll go ahead and calculate everything. The only drawback is The roll I would see would be normally for a standard cost part because you don't do a roll on an average or a FIFO.
That's correct.
Now, you can do a roll. I have had people do a standard cost roll, even though they're average or FIFO, just to do the comparisons. How far off from our estimated roll is our average or what we're currently looking at? So
Right.
they'll do a
But
cost
the
roll,
only reason
but
to
that's
do a
strictly,
roll would be to get your standard cost.
yeah, to get
Correct?
the evaluated, hey, this is what my engineering thinks it's going to cost me. What have we been hitting? That's going to be what's in the rolling average. And if any part's super far off, that's a candidate for someone needs to go reevaluate the average and recalculate it and update it.
Yes.
But the costing workbench would be, I would think, the best way to do that.
Yes.
Okay, and then, you know, what's a good time frame? You know, how often should this be run? It's just you know, we're not tremendously huge, so is it something every 6 months, once a month before month end?
When my customers start seeing material variances sway in either direction, up or down, when you start seeing material variance getting out of control, that's a time to do a standard cost roll. Because that means costs are going wonky, and the reason it's material based.
Yeah.
Might depend a little bit on which costing method you are too, because, you know, if you're standard, it's my understanding, I just learning some more from accounting, but if you're standard, you really don't want to run that cost adjustment until your inventory is here, right? And so depending again on how often does your change happen. We do run, I think we do run on a schedule every month that gets reviewed by manufacturing, just so that we can kind of see where, to Calvin's point, the wonkiness is, so that there can be a little bit of a maintenance mode prior to month end closing. But it doesn't always get posted, I think. Sometimes, probably more now than they used to be, that it gets posted.
The main
Yeah,
reason,
you can run it without posting.
one of the
Yeah,
main
that's why I'll have people do the cost roll and then just print the edit reports or grab the screens and dump them to Excel. Just so they can do the comparison against actual, or what's the average right now on file, what's my new rolled standard, and how far off am I, and where are my outliers. Jose might be able to give you an equation to show you the outliers.
Yeah, so Dan, to answer your question, we're coming from a company where, you know, a lot of the parts were, or the manufactured parts were standard costed. What we did is anytime there was a significant material or change in material, then that part was cost rolled. And they kept track of that based on material coming in, and then they would say, okay, we have this group of parts that use this resin type, so we're going to roll these parts. But other than that, they just did it on a case-by-case basis. They never did it on a, like, every 6 months, every year, whatever. I have heard that people do recommend it annually, but it would vary on your business.
Okay.
Well, I think you want to depend. If you're in steel right now, you probably are getting a cost adjustment or a change in your standard cost every month. And so depending on how your bill of materials are set up, that can make a huge difference in your bottom line if you aren't also then checking against your prices, your sales prices.
Yeah.
AKA, Dan, that affects you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what we're running into. Everything you've said is our manufacturing variance account is just going bonkers right now. And, you know, we're just trying to track things down. And, you know, I started reading about the cost roll up and even with cost adjustments in there that they don't actually get posted until you run a cost roll up.
Wait a minute. Dan, you just said your material variances are going wonky?
Yes.
Your average costed, they shouldn't be.
Well,
you shouldn't be posting a variance with average cost.
Not everything is average.
Okay, because I'm sitting here going, how the hell did you do that?
Yeah.
Average costed doesn't post a material variance. So I'm like, okay, what'd you do there?
Yeah.
Okay, so some items are standard, others are average.
Exactly. So, and that's, that's kind of what we're running into also when they're standard costs. I also read that you can make a change to the cost of it. However, until you do a cost roll up, that doesn't come into play.
Correct. Yeah.
That is correct.
Yeah, I do know we have a company that primarily uses steel, and they do probably a cost, well, they do a standard cost update on, for purchase parts and all, probably monthly.
Yeah.
Which then means they also got to do the roll up.
Now there is, we're talking 10.2 at least, right, aren't we?
Yeah, we're 10.2 500.
Okay. Epicor is updating all three buckets for you. So in the part cost table, you should be seeing changes to the last, the average, and the standard. So as transactions occur, you should be seeing average and last getting updated. You could also write a BPM that if the last cost sways far from the average, that's a red flag to have that cost or where that part is used get reevaluated for a roll. So if material came in all of a sudden with a 50% higher than the last time we bought it, you're going to see the difference between average and last really swing. So a method directive when that part cost gets updated, if the values are a certain percentage apart, send off a red flag to somebody to reevaluate that.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, hi, this is Michelle. I'm the controller for our company, but also do Epicor stuff. What I do here is our raw material is at last cost, and then our finished goods products are at standard. So it's easier for me to monitor our steel and aluminum prices on a month-to-month basis with the last costing, and then we do our standard roll up every quarter for our finished goods. It kind of separates the two buckets so we can monitor our CRU prices on material separately from our own, from our finished good products. So that might be something that somebody might want to talk to your accounting departments on, if that's a route they want to take to kind of offset this market right now and make it a little bit more manageable.
Okay, that sounds great.
And Lori Welch just threw out a comment that unless something changed, last and average get updated to the standard cost when they get updated. So if those parts are already marked as standard cost, they're not going to get updated. You're not going to see the difference between average and standard or average and last. But a part that's marked average cost should get updated with the last cost when it came in. So those may still be a candidate for red flag. Thanks, Lori.
Can I ask one more question? So let's say we go through the cost roll up. What would be the best report for them to run to be able to do the comparisons then? Is it just a like a whip there?
When you're in the costing workbench, there is a report. Wow.
That's going to give you the proposed variance, but that's not going to tell you between average and standard or standard and last what those are. You'd have to write your own report for that using the costing workbench table and the part cost table so that you could compare. This is what we had for average. This is what standard is. Here's what the variance is.
Okay, gotcha.
Caleb, are you still on? Because Caleb has written where I believe it's emailed to him. Or we have it as an SSRS, like you said, an SSRS report, but he must not be. It gets, basically then it gets emailed to accounting and manufacturing so they can review. Because we run this costing workbench on the schedule.
And Lori, I went ahead and unmuted you because I know your extensive use of costing methods.
Hello. The problem with, standard costing, you have to have your costing lot sizes that are correct, but to try and compare it to what would have been your last or would have been your average, there's really no good way to do that. The system doesn't track that unless something has changed in the last version.
No, but when you're in the costing workbench, before you post it, there's a I can't remember what it's called. It's been a long time since I've been in there, but isn't there a screen where you'll be able, it kind of pre-calculates the differences between your current and your new.
The prior standard to your current standard.
Right, so you can take that report.
Current standard, and this is what the new calculation is telling you.
Right, so you
but
can
not
take
like
that
current
report.
standard.
And you can export that from the table.
Right, you can take that from the table and make it into a report and send it out from that costing report.
Yeah. Because the thing you really need to, and one of the other things you need to add is volume to that. So when it looks at the cost to cost, you have to look at what it does over the volume of parts that volume that have that part number has. So if you're processing 10,000 units a month and you've got a variance of 50 cents, that's a lot. But if you're only processing 13 parts a month, that kind of gives you a different view of whether or not you have a problem that you need to look at. So you have to bounce it up against usage or something. So you get the extended cost of what the impact is going to be to your business.
Yep. But that would have to be a custom report above the standard one in the costing workbench if you're looking across different costing methods.
Correct. So that's why I would do it in Excel. I guess you could do that report to do the same thing, where it actually just goes through and pulls usage, and then extrapolates the usage against the old standard versus the new standard, and then you can look at what we keep calling the outliers.
Hopefully that answers your question there, Dan. Let me see here. Next one.
Okay.
Andrew Spock here. Encompass, is there a way to set focus on a field in Kinetic? The auto start works fine, but is there a way to set focus after an event, such as a button click? In the App Studio, you do have that auto start in the bottom. This tiny little corner here that says autofocus. So I can turn around and pick which one happens when the screen loads. But after such a thing as an event or a button click, you would have to possibly do that with a customization in App Studio. And I would probably throw this out to
in 2022, in 2022.2, whatever the new one is coming out, they added a set focus widget.
The set focus is also in 21.2.
Okay, so they added a set focus widget, so you should be able to call it. No. They added an actual widget in the App Studio event handler.
Awesome, that I didn't see.
So now you can drag. Basically, you can say after event. So you would say after button click, or after whatever event you want. set focus, and then you tell it what the binding of the field is. It is binding specific, so you can't focus random controls. You have to focus on a binding.
There you go. Does that answer your question there, Andrew? Hold on, I'm trying to slide up. Are you out there? There you are, Andrew. I'm trying to unmute you. Go for it.
So what version do we have to have that
The latest version that's on the cloud, I think, is 2020. Oh God, this version number.
22.1.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm on a little bit lower version on my testing environment, and we have something called control focus set, but it doesn't seem to really do anything.
Gotcha.
But do you know, can you use that on, say, like the trans view, or does it have to be on one of the like normal data view items?
So it's supposed to be on a data view, but trans view is a data view, so it technically should work there.
Okay.
So it should work there. If it doesn't work, post a question out on Epi users, and I know either me or Hannah or one of us will take a look at it with you. But I believe that does work. It also depends on, there's a bunch of race conditions that you can run into where if something else takes over and does something differently, it may look like it didn't do it. We've had to fight a couple of those battles with our upgrade, but it does work mostly.
Okay.
And then I would say something about on the condition. Anna was saying on the event, you could kind of sneak some JavaScript in there.
So
I mean, you can do some of that stuff, but that's all going away fairly soon. So I wouldn't rely on that too much.
Additionally, I would say that I did try to do that, but the problem is actually getting it by ID because that ID doesn't exist in the document, at least not as it's known.
When I was snooping around in DevOps, I was finding the ID sitting in there. So you might want to take a look at DevOps to find out, run the application in the web browser.
Okay.
To find the ID, that's where I was finding my IDs because I wasn't finding it easily inside the software.
Well, they're UD fields, so that so it would be like a UD text box or something. So that I couldn't find. I might be able to find like a standard field. I'm working on the MES, so yay. But no, thank you very much.
Awesome. And our next one, we've got a handful more here. Lisa McCarty at Modern Welding. Am I still able to access the technical field help? That's not gone away. Inside the software, when you click on the little help button, they're in 11 or in 12, you go down and click the Help and Support Center button at the bottom. And right here, the very first one is Display Field Level Help, Lisa. So you should still have access to that. The field level help should be in there. I never heard of anything of them taking that away or removing it. I will go ahead and unclick you, Lisa, unmute you here. Did that go ahead and answer? I just want to make sure that I was understanding your question right.
Yeah, I had read something online on one of the forums that had mentioned that they couldn't find the option anymore. So maybe they just didn't know where to go. I have not upgraded yet to the Kinetic, so I was just curious about that. So
okay. Yeah, just by clicking the little help question mark on the left panel, then go to Help and Support Center, and then on the top it says Display Field Level Help.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome.
And I can attest to that because I know I just used it the other day.
Okay.
Was that by any chance on the Epic or users group forums?
I can't remember where I read that. It probably was. That's where I go most often. So.
Got it. Okay.
I will admit, while doing the Stump the Chump and putting your question in there, I'm like, what does she mean they removed it? I'm like, they couldn't have. So, yeah. Of course, I had to go in and grab the snapshot today. I'm like, no, it's still in there. Okay.
Yeah, because it's used by so many of us. I know I use it a lot. So when I read that, I thought, oh no, surely not. So.
And Calvin, a follow on to that, Monty's asking, that does show the specific field, what it's bound to,
Exactly.
everything that it used to. Okay.
Yep. I know I had a heart attack with the question though. I'm like, no, they didn't miss that one. No, they
Well,
didn't.
this is also different to me, you know, where everything is, we're using the classic view right now. So all of the functionality of where the help is, I mean, it's going to be a huge learning curve.
Yep. And learning where they put that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's confusing. And I know recently I just started using the waffle, and it took me a little bit, but once I got used to it, it wasn't so bad. But I understand exactly what you're saying. And I keep telling myself I got to get out of old school someday and go into the new stuff. So
yeah, I keep telling myself the same thing.
It's not
easy. The waffle? What's the waffle?
The waffle? That's the 9 dots or whatever underneath the magnifying glass. It's the menu
the
button.
hamburger, what they always called the hamburger.
Got it. Okay.
It's not the hamburger, it's the waffle. It's the 9 dots.
Oh, the top left menu. The top left menu. Got you.
Yeah, the waffle.
Hamburger, isn't that the system monitor?
Hamburger with the 3 horizontal lines.
Hamburger is the system monitor.
No, the hamburger was the 3 horizontal lines.
Right.
The 9 dots, the phone. Okay, I can see the waffle there.
Yeah, that's the waffle.
Wow. Okay, gotcha. Thank
there,
you.
You just learned something.
I did learn something. We
I
gotta find
think
the
we
person
all
naming
became, yeah, I think we're now all millennials.
Yeah, well, okay. No, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
There is actually in the UX world, they actually call that the bento menu. Just FYI.
The bento box, nice.
Bento
menu, what?
Yeah. There's bento menu, meatballs menu, double hamburger menu, kebab menu, and hamburger menu. They have all these different terms for the dots.
Oh my goodness.
It may have been called a blue keg at one point in time too.
I do like
a
the
blue
waffle.
Keg?
I do like the waffle.
I've never heard the blue keg. I have heard the Death Star, but not the blue keg. Awesome.
It might have been a late night, but it has been called.
Okay.
I think that is the best way to end the Stump the Chump session. I thought there were a couple more slides, but they were actually blank pages that Fred left in here for any more questions that threw in. So it's like, hey, finally a questions page that's labeled Stump the Chump. And it's in the right section. Any other questions people are having here? Now's the free time.
I have a question. Does anybody here using PCID and get the PCID item table to be off sync with the par bin table nonstop all the time, but can't replicate it on demand?
PCID sounds like a punishment, but not here.
It is a punishment. It's driving us crazy. We've been able to trace it all the way down, logged every single table, did everything possible. We cannot figure out a way to replicate it reliably, but we can, without a doubt, show you in the system places and times very often where the par bin table and the PCID item table are not the same number, which should not be allowed. But since we can't replicate it and we can't tell Epic or how, they can't fix it and we can't replicate it, but it happens all the time.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's one of those fun ones.
Yep. Yeah. I usually don't know if anybody had some kind of magic, like, yeah, that happened to me, and it turned out to be this random thing here. We can't figure it out. We've spent countless man hours on this, and at this point, we're just.
Jose, could you make like a data directive, at least to email
That's
you
what I would say.
when it triggers that?
Oh,
at least,
yeah, no, we did data directives. We even did CDC login to every one of those tables. We have traced it down. We can see it happen, physically see it happen in the system. And we see the transaction and we look at the time. It happened like, last night at 8:21 p.m. randomly. There was an update to the PCID item table. Guess what else was happening in the system at the time? Absolutely nothing. There was no par transaction records being updated. There was no par bin records being updated. There was nothing else going on, but randomly at 8:21 last night, there was an update to the PCID item table that bumped the number by 1 and got it to be off sync with the par bin record. We can't tell you how or why, but we know it happened. It always seems to be related to there being, it always seems to be related to there having been a quantity adjustment done prior, at some point prior, but not immediately prior, like hours or days prior. So yeah, I just wondering if anybody had the same problem. I suspect most people are not dumb enough to be using PCID.
Well, but just a question, out of like at that time, besides multi-company process, there's other processes running?
Multi-company process. That's the only process that was running at the time, was the multi-company process, Hasso. But I will eat my hat if I can figure out why multi-company process would change the quantity in a PCID.
Would it be a bad idea to throw an exception when that happens?
Yes, because it happens way in the middle of nowhere, so I don't know what else I would kill by throwing an exception at that point.
Well, at least you would know what was causing it, though.
Right, but if we're in the middle of like doing a transaction or a quantity adjustment or something else, it might blow up because it's happening asynchronous. So it's not happening like there's nobody clicking on the UI and then this is happening, right? This is somehow happening out of sync with the rest of the system at some point. So if I throw an exception, I don't know what process I might be killing at that point. That scares me a little. I just was hoping that somebody had run into this, but I don't think. I think we're kind of the cowboys of PCID at this time.
You think it's something running in the background that maybe is triggering it?
That is what we think. There's some asynchronous process, but we can't figure out what that is. It's not our process. We don't have anything running.
Right.
You know, it's something that Epicor is doing, we think, but we can't tell what it is or why it is.
Kind of like an indexing, you think?
No, maybe. Again, indexing. We don't run indexing on our databases until Sundays at 3 a.m. and this is happening in the middle of the week.
Right. I'm just saying maybe a process that's similar to like an indexing.
Right. So yeah, you know, something that Epicor runs on a
something secretive.
Right. It happens every time it happens, or almost every time it has happened around 8 p.m., which again doesn't have all that much significant other than we see it happen around that time. But again, CDC turned on, we can see the transaction happen. We can see the transaction come in and the change, but it doesn't, you know, we don't know how, it just happens.
There's no backup, is it at that time?
My backup? No, we have transaction log backups every 10 minutes. So backups happen all the time.
Okay.
Backups are constant and not, that's not it. Not a clue. And again, it's not consistent at all. Not even a little bit. It is just random. One week we'll get 3 or 4, other weeks we'll get 10, other weeks we'll get nothing. We did find an issue where if the casing or the font case on the par bin record is not exactly the same as the case on the bin number in the PCID, that can cause an issue. Which is weird because the collation on SQL is specifically set by default to not care about case. But for some reason with PCID, if you try to do a transaction on a PCID where it says bin number is A1 with a lowercase a, and part bin has A1 with an uppercase A, then Epicor will bar follow it itself and tell you that part doesn't exist or whatever. So we did fix that out, across the board.
In that fashion.
Yeah, right. It's case sensitive, but only in that table, in that one transaction. Everything else, it doesn't seem to care. So again, we fixed that by doing a system-wide cleanup of all the wrong casings. But that doesn't seem to be the issue. That's an issue that causes another problem, but it's not this issue. It's driving us crazy.
It reminds me of the issue I had back in 904, take you back a few days, where all of a sudden print hung and everything hung up. There was no reason to explain it. MRP would hang, everything would hang, and there was nothing. So you had to reset everything. So we just wrote a little script to reset all the everything.
I remember that well. We used to do that too. We would have a monitor that would look and see how many immediate run requests were accumulating in the task table. And if we got to be more than 5 or 6, we would recycle the the task agent. We never could figure out why though.
Yeah.
PowerShell was wonderful, but
Yeah. All right. Well, I figure nobody would know, but it was you know, shot in the dark here. 120 people that maybe somebody had run into it. We can't
I
figure it
see
out.
Mike Gross has his hand up. I don't know if he has an answer.
anything in part tran, do you have an external warehouse, WMS, or freight 3PL processing that's syncing?
Nope. None of those, and nothing happens in part tran at the time. So we have part transaction shows a quantity adjustment on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday at 8 p.m. we see a random bump of 1, matching the quantity adjustment, a random bump on the PCID item table. But that original adjustment already also happened in the PCID item table, so it's basically doing it twice. And we have been able to tie it to a quantity adjustment, so it always appears to be, if we did a quantity adjustment of 50, then at some point in the future, and again, that future is not certain, but at some point in the future, we have seen it where it'll bump it up by 50, even though it already had done that original adjustment. We just can't figure out what the trigger is. We thought it had to do with part bin deferred table, but we've been monitoring that table, and that table cleans out, you know, cleans out pretty quickly, not days later. So we can't figure it out.
Okay, and then Wayne Welsh also had an idea. Wasn't sure if it would help, but he thought he had heard of an asynchronous update on certain transactions.
Right, that's the part bin deferred table. So Epicor has about 5 or 6 tables: part quantity, part bin deferred, and there's a couple more where basically they put transactions in, but then slowly process them through. We put a whole bunch of monitor on the tables too, thinking that, oh, maybe the part bin deferred is getting stuck. But that doesn't appear to be the case. Yep, it's just one of those things we're going to have to live with for now. We're trying, again, we have written so many data directives and logging of all sorts, and nothing seems to be helping. So at this point, we're going to have to pivot to a data fix more than a.
And out of curiosity, which version are you seeing this in, just so I can take note?
2021.2.10, I think. It's whatever the current version we are in. Yeah, it's pretty one of the latest ones. But I will say, you know, we just upgraded to Kinetic, and we had the same problem before, so it's not a version specific thing. It's been around forever, at least for us.
Okay, we did get a couple more questions in here. David Height has one. What's the best way to add a field to the time phase grid? Example, I want to add the part rev and looking for the best approach to add that to the time phase grid. Well, you just pull out your little magic marker and write on the screen, time part rev, and then every time the grid pops up, as long as you have it maximized, you'll see part rev added there.
So I think both me and Jose have done this, and I think both me and Jose ended up with custom code on the customization, simply adding a programmatic column. Because it's not really, it's kind of like built on the fly with all kinds of different columns that are in the database.
David, I'm going to throw this out to you. Is this classic or kinetic? And let's go ahead and find you and unmute you. Wow. David Height, there you are. You are unmuted, David.
In this instance, it's classic. You know, a classic temp epi data view that's coming across. The problem is when we go to do it, is since part rev's in a different table, you can't just unhide it or add it. I'm pretty positive I need some kind of customization, but I wasn't sure if you had a good example or a best approach.
Yep, out on epi users, I am sure someone has posted, because I've seen this many times, where in code, they will go out and run a BAQ, pull back the part rev for the parts in the time phase grid, and display that info. There is actually for kinetic. Oh, you found it?
Yeah, I sent a link to an example. Yeah, there's a bunch of examples on epi users, but I just found a link that's specific to time phase.
Hold on, I'm going to copy that and send that in the question answer back over to David. But David, there's also a demo in ERP videos, exactly how to add the part rev or other tables from part to another screen. So if on order entry, I want to see additional information regarding the part on the order screen, They literally in the video walk you through the steps how to add a BAQ, and then turn around and pull those fields and add them to the screen.
And where was that video?
That's for Kinetic. I want to say that was ERP videos on the Epicor portal. But that was for Kinetic, not for Classic.
All right, sounds good. I'll look at Jose's link. Thanks, Jose.
Awesome.
No problem.
Next one is from Matthew Heck. Anything in the release notes about SSO support being dropped? Older install documentation mentioned that current SSO config was being obsoleted in newer versions.
Well, I think in the new Kinetic, you have to use the Azure AD.
Correct.
So maybe that's what they're referring to if you want to authenticate. Jose, do you?
2022.1 still supports standard SSO. They are preferring, it is preferred that you use Azure AD, but you can still set it up to use standard SSO. You just have to configure it to use NetTCP and not HTTP as the binding. But it's still supported as of 2022.1.
I think that maybe that's what they're referring to, since they're going to drop NetTCP. Eventually, they'll go away, and you'll end up with Azure AD. Maybe that's
right. So yeah, as long as it's still supported with NetTCP, you're okay. But yeah, this current version, the 2022.1, still supports NetTCP, although it requires manual configuration.
Yeah, and I think if you pick it, it'll actually throw you a big warning saying, "Hey, you might want to reconsider, but we will still let you do it." So
okay,
in the admin console.
That's what the documentation was specifically referring to, as the net.tcp being obsoleted. So I wasn't sure when they said in future versions as to how quickly they were going to do that, because that we very much make use of trying to keep authentication as simple as possible for my end users, because user passwords are just a thorn in my side.
Yeah, I would recommend you configure Azure AD. You can even do. I mean, you don't have to run all of your AD through Azure. You can just do a Azure AD, basically a clone that copies over your standard Active Directory to Azure on a schedule every night, and then still use Azure AD as your single sign-on. That's how we do it. It works fine.
Gotcha. Do you think if they drop the net.tcp that, because we're just local AD, that you know, there's some other workaround, because you know we're not using Azure for anything right now.
I mean, I don't know when they're going to drop it. I don't have any inside information on that. I know that it is currently supported in 2022.1, but it requires now requires you to manually configure it, so it's not the default option. I suspect that since that now has been dropped, that's not the default. That in the near future, they'll probably drop it.
Deprecated. Yep.
Deprecated. Even though you don't use Azure for anything, I would highly recommend you. I mean, again, configuring Azure AD is fairly trivial, and it doesn't require you to do anything fancy on your internal AD. It's just basically you just set it up and tell it, hey, I want to use Azure AD, and you basically clone over your user setup over there. So it's fairly straightforward. So
well, that's really kind of Jose. Unless you've upgraded your AD from NT4 to small business server to the newer versions of Windows, and you never really went through and cleaned up your entire AD.
Well, I mean, if you're running NT4, if you're running NT4, Calvin, then you need to just get a new machine.
But that's when we started, and we always applied upgrades, never cleaned it up. So our jumping into Azure was a living nightmare.
Right.
We should have just said at like 2012 or 2008, let's just start over and rebuild it. No, we kept upgrading. Yeah, that may not have been the smartest thing in retrospect.
Right.
But we do have another question that falls right behind this, Mark Obrantz. Is anyone running Epicor in Azure? What are the pitfalls in the performance? Seeing as how you're in Azure there, Jose, you want to take this one?
We are running Epicor in Azure. Now, we are not running it in a headless environment. Basically, we're just hosted in Azure. Performance is great, as normal as it can be. It just looks like another part of our network, so there's no downside there. We are considering looking at moving to a headless database for it once we get to our full implementation, which is going to be a bunch of users. We're looking to see if we can get it configured to be basically a headless database. I'm not sure if Epicor supports that yet, so we're kind of talking to Epicor about it. But performance is fine. Performance is no different than running it locally, honestly. We haven't had any problems. I mean, Epicor is not the fastest beast in the world, so don't expect miracles, but it doesn't really perform any less than local. Particularly if you set up your zones correctly in Azure, right? Don't pick, something out in the Midwest data center if you're in the East Coast. The further away your data center is from you, the more latency you're going to see. So as long as you situate your Azure setup geographic to you, then I don't see any reason why you would have any performance issues.
Yep. Now, for government contract clouds, your ability to pick data centers greatly shrinks. For general populace, picking your data center geographically to where you are is not so hard. But for GCC, government cloud contract, yeah, now you have less to pick from.
And be very careful on your government stuff there. GCC is great for some controlled unclassified information, CUI as it's sort of controlled technical information. But if you are an ITAR, if you have ITAR information, GCC high. GCC does not cut it.
Yep.
And good luck moving tenants if you haven't picked the right one. That's yeah, have fun.
Just right-click, download, and upload the new one.
It is a nuisance because trying to find the right people to work with Microsoft to go through the GCC approvals and the process is also a difficult thing, because there's a lot of resellers that say they're GCC, but then when you get down to the meat and potatoes, oh, we don't cover that part. Oh, we don't cover that part. So it is very difficult to make sure that you go in fully cards on the table, this is what we need, and then have them get the certification back from Microsoft Azure that, yes, this is going to be provided. You got to make sure that do your due diligence there.
Yeah, and obviously this guy isn't going to be able to respond to everyone, but if you are looking for the guy with the answers at Microsoft, Richard Wakeman. He is running that entire show over there for any of their government data. So once again, Richard Wakeman, find him on LinkedIn, and he's very active in that community. So.
Awesome, Matt. If you can go ahead and forward that over, I'll even go ahead and put that in with your question here. I'll add it to the Stump the Chump as one of the topics for Azure and GCC. I'll go ahead and put his contact in there if you can email that over to me.
Yeah, I don't have any direct. I assume it's just listed on his LinkedIn. But yeah, if you ever attend any webinars for anything with the government space, DoD, he is Microsoft spokesperson for any of that stuff.
Got it. Next one from Amy Combs, and our last question out here. We are implementing the production module, and we have security question around employee maintenance. What all does the employee affect, and who usually has access to the employee? And Amy just left the meeting. If you're using the payroll module, Amy, I'm going to go ahead and put this. Well, up. She popped back in the list, but she's not showing as there. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Amy. So the employee is affecting the labor. So when someone clocks on and off of a job, the employee basic under job production management, job management setup is the basic employee. If you're using the payroll module from Epicor, I believe the employee gets deprecated and moves over to the payroll module, and there you have to be a security manager to get access to the employee.
Okay, I think that's what we were most worried about, how it affected the payroll. But okay. You have to have the module?
Correct. If you don't have the module, then you're using the employee on the job management setup menu. which is just employee basic. You can put a labor rate in there. Any confidential info, there really isn't anything on the employee screen other than possibly, and most clients that I know put an average pay rate for the department, not each employee's labor rate. Because if you're in Job Tracker and you go to the labor transactions and hit retrieve and scroll all the way to the right, it shows you, oh, they worked 1 hour and the total cost was $25.32. So I now know what the employee made. And Job Tracker is available on every screen throughout Epicor. So that's why I'll see most people put an average labor rate for the work center or for that department rather than each employee's labor rate.
Yeah, that's what we did at the last company I worked for. We put in an average rate for the employee, what the standard, what we costed at. So if our costing rate for this employee was, $16.70 an hour, that's what we put in for the employee's labor rate.
How does the labor rate and the employee, how does that differ from the resource group labor rate?
The costing rate and the quoting rates on the resource group are used for doing the part costing and job cost tracking.
Okay.
Yep. And the labor rate in the employee is used for the actual.
So you'll see an actual labor rate and you'll see an estimated labor rate or estimated labor rate. That's where the two differences are going to show up.
Okay. For the payroll module, is it basically you pay your employees through it?
Through Epicor, correct.
Okay.
And there's some security on the employee record, so it will allow them to do certain things. So there's a checkbox if they're a supervisor, then they can see. There's some screens that pertain to the supervision that they can, they have access to. They'll be able to see those, especially in MES, the little buttons. Some things will be grayed out if they don't have access to it. So if they're not a warehouse person, you uncheck the warehouse. So they don't have access to issuing materials, things like that. So the different checkboxes that you see make those buttons in MES light up or stay gray.
Okay.
Awesome. The other thing I would say pay attention to there, Amy, is when you activate the payroll module. So if you do go down that avenue with Epic or buy it, do this in a test, get a test license, make sure that you fully like this. Backing out the payroll module is a living nightmare. That is not an easy thing to remove from the software. Because once all that security and everything moves from the employee basic over to the payroll module, and then you decide, oh, we don't want to use payroll, you disable the module, that doesn't turn off all the field and the integrated security through the application. So that's one of those kind of one-way door modules. Once you start using it, it's a pain to remove that. And it'll be some conversion programs and customizations from support to do that.
And I think also talked earlier about security and obfuscation. Now, when you copy your production database to test, you have something else to worry about. It might contain sensitive employee information that developers and whoever else uses test could see.
Awesome.
Hey,
Mark is also asked, go ahead.
Kelvin, one other question that we had an issue at a smaller company where, and kind of related to security, when you have that one employee coming in late, he just calls his buddy and says, clock me in, number is 3791, whatever. Because there's no password required if you use a generic MES account. Have you ever prevented anything like that happening, like by maybe requiring key cards or?
Biometric, handprint, fingerprint scanner, facial recognition with a built-in camera. Even doing like a barcode scanner, if people are smart, they know they can make a photocopy of it and hand it to their friend, so now their friend has both. If they're going to work around that way, like sharing the employee ID, I'll share their barcodes as well on a scanner. RFID, much easier way. You got to have the chip to have the reader find you. We had a customer do a handprint scanner, and that handprint also opened doors in the building. So they had security a little further. They had to control who could get into certain areas. And then I had one customer that did USB fingerprint readers. That doesn't always work in a heavy machine shop where fingers get dirty.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Or heaven forbid, fingers get cut off in the machinery. I can't clock in anymore.
We just did RFID cards, so that worked pretty good. You just wave it in front of the scanner and off you go. And I know for Rob, we did where the card had to be present. So as soon as the card lifted from the sensor, you got clocked out of MES. So you had to have the card present and accounted for in MES while working. As soon as you remove the card, it clocked you out of the job, clocked out of MES. Because they need their medical place and they need to track exactly who's doing what when. So they cannot have Joey be clocked in and Mikey doing the work for traceability. So it was all tied to that key card. So they would plug the card into the key card reader and then it would automatically log them into MES, allow them to do some work. And as soon as they pull that card out, it clocked them out.
Nice. Now, Mark Albrecht did throw the second question out. Is there anybody other than Jose that has made Azure work for themselves? He's like, outside of getting PCID to work, Jose can make anything happen in Epicor. So he's looking if anybody else has done this.
We've implemented a few customers in it ourselves. So it's not terrible.
Yeah, and also note that Epicor, when you host with Epicor, they are actually using Azure. So.
Yep. And I want to say they just posted their 1,000th customer. But prior to doing Azure, Epicor did use somebody else. I don't remember who it was because that cloud was hacked. This goes back a year and a half or so ago, but they ended up getting hacked and had a data breach.
Yeah, I remember that email that came out.
Very quiet, subtle, we're apologetic.
Yeah.
But the dark web put it out there. Hey, you want a sample of 10 gig of the data? We'll give it to you. Verify that it's real. So anybody else, if you are on Azure, either go ahead and raise a hand or go ahead and send a message to the chat and we'll go ahead and pull you into the board here.
Mark Wansel, he's been on Azure. Mark, are you still there?
He had to step out, he said.
Got it. Yeah, I think me and Christine
exactly
are on Citrix right now. Christine that left.
Yeah, and Mark's not on Azure any longer because he's now working for the company I worked for, Hasso.
Oh.
Yep. Everybody jumped jobs. I'm working somewhere else. He's working somewhere else. You know, it's kind of one of those things. We change seats.
It's just a jump to the left.
Yeah. But I will be at Insights, so you can see me there.
Mark had his hand raised. I've got him unmuted now.
Oh, I was just, we're experimenting moving a test database into Azure and was going to use that as a test case. And then maybe look at replicating our production server into Azure as for a DR scenario. And who knows, maybe eventually go all the way there, but at least start with the test database, see how it works. We can do some performance comparison. I think we're most of the way there. In fact, I'll know on Friday. I'll know this Friday if it works. So that's where we're at, and I was just curious of all the moving pieces.
I think the only one thing you should always consider is if you have, let's say, I don't know your business size, but if you guys have AT&T, and when AT&T is down, you might want to have a failover to Comcast because unlike when you obviously in the cloud, when your internet is down, you're down. When you're on-prem, when your internet is down, you don't really care because you could still use the ERP system. So
I'm well aware of how much that goes. Yeah, we're with here in the Midwest Spectrum. We had lost our internet for 26 hours in February. Fortunately, it was over a weekend, so our little Cradle Point was able to keep the bare necessities going, and we're on-prem. So, and then when we now have a second fiber coming in at 100 megs, we got a 1 gig primary, we'll have 100 meg secondary very soon. So, but I guess I'll let some people know how it goes. If I see somebody at Insights, I'll let you know how it looks. Because I will say, Epicor speed is unimpressive on premise.
It's not any more impressive on Azure.
I know it won't get faster. Maybe it's slow enough that it won't matter. I mean, we're still on 10.2.700 running all classic stuff.
It won't be slow enough for you to notice, I don't think. I mean, we were on-prem and then now we're not, and it really has made no difference to us in terms of performance.
Good. Well, I appreciate the input. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Next one is from Monty over here. Does the eMug still maintain a presence on the EUG website? Will today's presentations be posted there as well as on the EPI users? We do turn around and post. We send a notification off to the EUG that we're having meetings, but they don't always get rolled out and updated. And I believe, Christine, are you and Beth meeting Jennifer? I know she had gotten a room down at Insights.
I haven't heard anything yet. If there's a regional leaders meeting, I haven't heard anything yet. I'm just waiting to hear anything final on that.
So Monty, what we do is we put the minutes together and we have the links to the videos, which are hosted on YouTube. So as long as you're getting the invites from us, you'll be getting the minutes, which will have the links in there. I tried to post the meeting minutes to the EUG site, but today when I went to log in, they said my account had been disabled, even though I'm the leader of the eMug as far as they're concerned. So I'm working through that one right now.
Yeah, getting content connected through the EUG has been a little bit difficult for the user group leaders. So while we try to post things up there, we haven't been using it because it hasn't been a reliable source for getting info out to people.
Once you have the videos and stuff, feel free to post them on EPI users. You should be able to. So.
Okay, we can make a post for the minutes out to the EPI users.
I mean, we might know somebody that'll let that through.
You might.
It's just kind of weird. I know they hired a new person, Michelle Harhut, I think was her last name, to be kind of the liaison for the regional user groups. But it's been hit or miss trying to get responses. I know Marilyn was there before, and she wouldn't always turn around and answer everything because I know she was busy. She was the one-armed person for that whole group. I thought Michelle was there to help her out, but haven't heard if anything's going any smoother. Last time I emailed her, I haven't heard an answer back, and then I got the message from Jennifer that they had secured a room at Insights for the EUG leaders to get together, but I hadn't heard who was going there or when it was, just the location of the room.
I actually heard that if we have what I got is in an email was, if we want to have our users meet us, there was a room available. But I hadn't heard anything about regional leaders meeting as a group. So I don't know. This is kind of typical the way that they've done it. It hasn't changed.
Yeah, it's been a little bit rough. Let me see if I still have.
And as a leader, we used to have more ability to post on the actual EUG site in our region. We had control over our regional page, and now we don't. So, sorry.
Hey, Monty is the VP here. Let's turn around with the EUG. Monty, you are our new liaison.
Already responded to him.
Okay, I saw that go through there. I'm like, awesome. Next one. Lori Welch had a question or comment. They didn't go to Azure. They went to Light Edge. And their company saw a major speed improvement for going there, Mark. And it's working very well for them. So there's a word for going into the cloud, but a different cloud. And let me see here. Yusuf, we have another question. Anyone having issues with dashboard filters having external BAQs? I haven't done a lot with the dashboards inside Kinetic, and I'm going to say this is most likely where you're talking, Yusuf. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you here. Send the unmute request.
Hey, all right. This is in Epicor 10. So today morning only we had a standard BAQ. For some reason it was like hanging, it was not responding. So we converted that standard BAQ into external, and it works fine. I mean, it fetches the data in a few seconds, around like 40-50,000 rows. But then when I tried to add the filters on the dates and some like Boolean type data, but for some reason it was not working. I'm not sure what is wrong there. But that filter works on a standard BAQ, but external BAQ it's not working.
Jose or Hasso, I know you guys have done more with external BAQs, passing a filter via dashboard.
So the only issue I can relate to on that is if the filter you're putting on is on a calculated field, then Epicor will turn your dashboard into a CTE. It will turn your BAQ automatically into a CTE. And we talked about this a little bit earlier session, but what that'll do is it'll actually run the entire data set before the filter is applied. So if that's the case, if one of your filters was on a calculated field or a field that is not tied to one of the tables directly, Epicor will turn that BAQ into a CTE, which will then run the entire data set unfiltered and then apply the filter after the fact, which would, if you're talking about 40 to 50,000 rows, that would definitely make it so that it chokes or doesn't perform the way it's supposed to. But that's really the only issue I've run into. And it's by design, right? If you put a filter in a calculated field, well, Epicor has to calculate that field before you can filter.
No, it's not calculated fields. It's all direct table fields.
So,
but as an external, it would have to turn around and pull the whole data set before it can filter it.
No, it should do it. It should do it fine if it's not a if it's not a field that what's called derived. If it's not a derived field where it basically is a direct, customer that name equals Mark, then it shouldn't have to do a CTE for those. But if you're doing it on a result of a subquery or a subquery filter, then Epicor will turn it into a CTE, and that would affect performance. But
yeah, that may be the case. I need to check on that.
Do a simple test by just dropping in like the customer or one table in a BAQ and do nothing but display the fields and put a filter on it and see if
because but this BAQ has actually the external BAQ what I created view SKU that has got a lot of tables around like I'm not wrong, like 13-14 tables joins are there. And yes, possibly there are subqueries as well. Subqueries also there.
Gotcha. But yeah, no, external BAQs work fine, as long as.
What you said, I just need to go back and check, man. But usually, then what you do is for dashboard, what we do is we create a UD forms, and then we directly call the BAQs through the code, and then we do the filters on the data table. That if standard dashboard or this external dashboard doesn't work for us.
Yeah, that's an option. Another option is to add parameters to the BAQ, and then those will bubble through. They will bubble out to the dashboard. And it actually, parameters are usually going to be much more efficient in general because
but the user, they don't like that.
The users don't like a
No,
parameter.
no, they don't. Yeah, they don't like that popping up that screen.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Our final one for the day is from Mel Malay. Sorry if you answered this question, but what's the status of the product configurator upgrade in Kinetic? And in the what's new in 2022, Mel, they changed the name from KB Max to CPQ. And this will be the new product configurator. Now, the original product configurator will still be there. This is all to the engine behind the enhanced quality module and the inspection plans. So that one should still stick around. CPQ will be the new SaaS-based product configurator for sales and products and quotes and jobs. Awesome. I think we got through all the questions. Are there any others still popping in?
I haven't seen any.
I know I was going to say, if we keep going, then we'll probably get everybody unmuted on the meeting. Got a question from John, time and expense entry. Let's try searching the waffle. Come on, I should get points for that. Time and expense entry, not approval. Thank you. Really? I think I clicked it. I did click it. Now, John, I just pulled up the time and expense entry. It's not in 10. So this may have been an older version that had the buttons on here, because you could turn around and update your labor quantity, scrap quantity, nonconformance, and reprint tickets here. But I'm not seeing the print button anywhere on here. Is it on actions? Nope. Entering meter readings and info, but not printing the tags anymore. So this would have to be going into customization mode and just running base form so that that screen would pop up.
You can do it in Office MES. That's how I did it.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that on time and expense entry. So you're saying I need to go to MES to be able to do anything with printing tags?
Or what Jose was saying is just go in through regular Office MES.
Okay.
Yeah, if you search your menu, there's an Office MES. You gotta be clocked in, but Office MES will pop up and work like regular MES, but you don't have to leave Epicor, and you can be in developer mode and then go to the base that way.
Okay, I'll go ahead and try that. Thank you.
There's got to be more than one way to skin a cat. It's Epicor. There's 10 ways to do everything.
That's very true.
Awesome. I'm not seeing any more questions popping in. John was the last one. I see Yusuf is on his way out. But you know it's got to be a late day for him because he's coming from a .no domain, which is somewhere off, I want to say Norway.
Yep.
which is incidentally where Christine just left yesterday.
Actually, I'm in Wisconsin.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I was going to say, John, you're just over the border. Yusuf is out in Norway.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that. Probably because of our parent company.
Okay. Awesome. We should be good to go. I will go ahead and pull my screen sharing, Fred, and send it back over to you.
All right. For those of you that are still left, just a reminder, do fill out the survey, which will show up either as soon as you leave or I believe an email link gets sent out tomorrow. But we do take all those comments. It helps us figure out what to present in the next things, what works, what doesn't work. So please let us know what you want to see. And we will see you all at the next meeting. Thank you very much for attending, everyone.